This is Wicked the Alien.
And this is Gwen the Ducky. Welcome to another episode of Ducky and the Alien. Now, you may notice something different this time around. We now have a proper intro, and I think it looks great. Anyway, we are going to talk about Knott's Berry Farm, like we did in the last episode. And
But
then
more in depth.
And then I am going to read off of an article from Travel Channel entitled 11 of the Scariest Ghost Stories from Reddit. It is from August 5th,
Wow.
2021. It's a very old article, but it is still
Cool.
worth reading, so stay tuned. And I
Okay.
also want to give a birthday shout out to the one and only Peter Schilling. Yeah, it's his birthday today. I am
Oh,
going.
it was also my friend's birthday today. That's why I was at the party.
Oh my goodness, what a fascinating
Coincidence?
coincidence. Yes,
Peter Schilling rocks, man.
absolutely. I agree. Today he is turning 68 years old.
Oh, that's a good age.
That's right. He's been through so much in his life. If I remember correctly, he was abused by his own mother growing up. And he
Oh,
initially
so
had,
he's a PTSD as well, a
yeah,
PTSD warrior.
and he went on to a career in football before he ultimately got into music, which he still does to this day, obviously.
Cool.
Yeah, and
So he's a PTSD warrior.
he
Shout
is.
outs to him for sure.
Absolutely. I read about this in a German article from a while back, when I was in my initial Peter Schilling arc. And it's fascinating
Yeah.
how he made lemons into lemonade, with his singing career. He went through
Yes,
a
that's the
burnout
same with
period.
me.
He went through a burnout period in the early 90s, and in, I believe, the past 2 decades, he went through a revival, and since then he is happily making music and finally gaining the recognition he deserves, for crying out loud. About
Yeah. That's a success story about PTSD that it will not last forever, the PTSD, but if you put your mind to it, you actually can make a life for yourself while you still have the condition and even be afterwards.
Absolutely. And I made a birthday edit for Peter Schilling a while back and posted it via my private Instagram. I'm not going to give out my private Instagram for obvious reasons, but I will show you
I know
the edit
those
here.
reasons.
Looking back at that time, I should have just kept my public Instagram up, the one that I had for general entertainment and photo edits. Gotta think
Yes,
things
that
through
would have
fully
been good.
first. And I most certainly did think things through fully when I deleted my public Instagram, which is same name as my YouTube and SoundCloud. I'm gonna definitely
Also,
get back on that again.
I added you on Twitter.
Awesome. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Alrighty. We are going to get to the deep dive on Knott's Berry Farm's jams and jellies.
Yeah.
So, Wicked, have you ever tried any of the Knott's Berry Farm's jams and jellies before?
I don't believe I had. I don't think I've had them before. If I did, it was unknowingly.
If it wasn't annoyingly, did it at least taste good?
Oh, they all taste good.
I appreciate it. Me being a California native, I was able to eat the Knott's Berry Farms brand of jams and jellies. My favorite one being the seedless raspberry one. That
Oh,
one
I
is
love
actually,
raspberry anything, raspberry anything, and lemon anything. I love.
yeah, it's too bad that they don't have any lemon jelly or grape jelly. I wish they had the grape jelly, like Welch's has grape jelly, but better.
Yep.
It is what it is.
Oh, I
But,
can't stand grape.
well, I like grapes. To each their own.
That's okay.
Knott's Berry Farm jams and jellies originated with boysenberry. Boysenberry is a
Boysenberry?
good fruit. Yes, boysenberry. I've had it quite a few times, and it's good.
I believe it would be boysenberry.
Yeah, it is Knott's signature fruit, believe it or not. Man,
It's
and
their
that's,
signature fruit?
yep, that's where it all began. Then we have the theme parks as well as Soak City.
Yes, I've heard of Soap City. The last time
And
we talked.
yes, I went into that in the last video. The
Mm-hmm.
last video will be featured at the outro. So be on the lookout for that as you continue watching this.
Yep.
And then there are the Peanuts characters that they have as mascots. Bet you didn't know this. Knott's Berry
They have
Farm
the
has
peanut.
Peanuts characters
Yeah.
as mascots.
Like Charlie Brown and them.
Charlie Brown and them. Yes, you got it right, girl. It's a collab made in heaven, if you will.
Oh, that looks interesting. Would have been interesting had I been able to go to the Knott's Berry.
Man, I wish I was able to I wish I told you about it sooner, but oh man. Either way, it is kind of a FOMO moment right there on your end.
Yeah.
FOMO stands for fear of missing out.
Yeah. I hate missing out.
As consolation, there is still the theme parks. So,
Oh.
yeah, if you ever come down here to visit, maybe we can go there sometime. For
That
real.
would be good. That
Yes.
would be good if I can get a valid passport. Those
And a,
things
val-
are not easy. Huh?
and a valid driver's license because I need to learn to drive still. I'm almost 30 and I still can't drive, but that's going to be rectified soon.
Oh, I'd like to learn how to drive because my backtrack to the Peter Schilling thing, the PTSD doesn't last forever. So
Right.
therefore, I think I would like to learn how to drive. But back to Knott's Berry.
Yes. Knott's Berry. Knott's Berry Farm was parented by Smuckers. Smuckers makes very good Uncrustable sandwiches, and they also make good strawberry and grape jam as well.
Oh yeah, I've had some of that, I believe. I know I've had Smuckers.
Smuckers is a good brand too, but I am mad at them for discontinuing Knott's Berry Farm because that
I
brand was
know
awesome.
that.
I love their jams and jellies. And to that, I say to them, F you.
Now, you know what that it says on the First Amendment. You can actually say the whole word if you want.
I know, but I just choose not to today.
Okay, that's fine.
Yeah,
I understand.
yeah, I have vented all there is to vent about this topic. It's like
Yep.
a grieving process for me. There is the typical 5 stages of grief, you know, anger, depression, denial, acceptance. I forget what the other one was at this current moment.
Okay.
Yeah. Now,
Bargaining.
yes,
Bar.
bargaining. There we go. Bargaining. Now, there we go. So I believe I've talked about all there is to talk about with Knott's Berry Farm. So I'm going to move on to 11 of the scariest ghost stories from Reddit. Again, that old article
Okay.
from Travel Channel. Alrighty, so this is the first one on the list. It wasn't
Yeah.
a little girl. I was camping with my husband and his family at a small remote lake in New Mexico. There were about 10 people in our group and another group of 6 people in the next campsite. It was nighttime and both groups were doing typical activities, making s'mores, having a few drinks, and telling stories. When we all heard what sounded like a little girl yelling out for help. Neither group had children with them, but we were all positive we were hearing a little girl and decided to search the area we heard the noises from together. There was a
Now.
there was a field behind our campsites, and we all saw a very tall, pure white figure standing maybe 100 feet away from us in the field, making the noises. We all agreed this thing looked maybe 6 feet tall, skinny, and white as could be. We made our way closer to investigate, but whatever it was that we saw started backing off as we got closer, and it disappeared into the trees. All night, we continued to hear a little girl calling for help as we tried to sleep.
Oh
What are your
boy.
thoughts on this?
I think the little girl. I don't want to alarm people. If the little girl was calling out for help, I'm pretty sure she was murdered. She was trying to get her point across, like trying to tell her story and get justice. There's about three different reasons why ghosts will spook haunt is they're not satisfied, they want justice or they want revenge. In this case, this is justice. And to tell their story as if the spirit world is a court of law.
Right. I
They're just
absolutely agree.
telling their they're just telling their story by reenacting what the hell happened to them.
That's right.
And
It's a
then the
sign.
other is revenge, and those ones you don't want to meet. And then there's this ones that have unfinished business that aren't really satisfied, so they're earthbound until whatever they want done is done.
Absolutely. Okay, we're going to move on to the next ghost story, The Walking Dead. I am a psychiatric nurse, and early in my career, I worked at a residential mental health facility. One of our residents was an elective mute, which means that he couldn't talk, but there were no medical reasons as to why. He had spoken earlier in his life, and in fact seemed quite normal back then, with the exception of being close to 7 feet tall. He'd been raised
Oh,
in the South and joined the military when he was 19, but one night he vanished. He was declared AWOL, and eventually he was declared missing and dead. 10 years later, a 7 foot tall man walked into a VA hospital emergency room in my part of the Midwest and said to the receptionist, "My name is Marian Duchin, not the real name, and I've been dead for 10 years." Those were the last words he ever spoke. Chilling. Very chilling. He
Very
was,
chilling.
yeah, he was covered with dust and he was wearing the same clothes he'd been reported to be wearing the night he'd vanished. His social security number had not been used, and he had no identification on his person. However, they were able to identify him, I guess, via fingerprints. The family was notified, but they said they had already grieved their lost man and that whomever was claiming to be him simply could not be. They demanded not to be contacted again.
Oh,
Mary Mary paced all day every day, moving his mouth that looked like talking or muttering, but no sound came out. He had an unnerving habit of throwing his head back with his mouth wide open as if he were laughing heartily, but not even a breath could be heard. If I talked to him, he appeared to listen, periodically throwing his head back in that laughter mimicking way of his. Various medications were tried, but they did not affect him either positively or negatively. Occupational therapy did nothing because Marion would just grin and unless told to stay put, he'd get up and start pacing again. Oh, wow. On my last day at that job, the last thing I saw was Marion pacing in the parking lot, throwing his head back to laugh. And there are two quotes on that. Later, I wondered if all along I'd been dealing with a ghost. All these years later, I still don't know. I would say yes, you were dealing with a ghost. How about you?
yes, I would, especially if the fingerprints checked out.
Right.
That
It,
has to be a ghost.
yes,
I think he
absolutely.
must have had unfinished business.
Obviously, yeah. Yeah. And especially because the family did not want to hear about this whole situation because they are already
Ye-
traumatized just from having lost him. Man.
Yeah, I understand the feeling.
So I don't really blame them. I'm just
I
gonna
don't
put
blame
that out
them
there.
either. If someone said my mother just walked into the house, I'd tell them to shut the hell up.
Right. You're experiencing one of those stages of grief, which is anger. You,
Actually, it's starting to slope down, not into depression. I already had that. Into acceptance. I've done enough of the other four.
right. And most important to know that, yeah, not all stages of grief are linear, and sometimes there are no five stages of grief. Grief is very linear depending on how you deal with it. So it is unique to every person that's out there. It just depends on the individual. Anyway, let's continue. The unrest stop. I was driving across country with my mom and sister when I was 16, and my sister was 20. It was late, but we were well rested, still on alert. We were driving along an interstate and needed gas and a bathroom break, so we stopped at the only rest stop in 200 miles. There was a van full of teenagers on a road trip at the gas station, as well as a small gray car parked at the pump in front of us, with two young men standing still outside it. When we got there, everything felt wrong. We'd been on the road for days and seen many rest stops at night and had never been afraid until then. My mom and sister went inside and I stayed in the car. I heard the teenagers say they were creeped out and couldn't get the pump to work, and they left in a hurry. I was watching the car in front of us, and the two men had not moved at all, not an inch. They weren't talking, they weren't on phones. They were just standing there, still as stone.
Oh, nay. That's
Right,
creepy.
right. Very creepy.
I don't know what to say about that.
Yep. My sister and mom came running back out to the car, and when they got in, The two men slowly turned to look at us while not moving or pivoting the rest of their bodies. I swear to we all saw the same thing. They had eyes dark as pitch and empty, truly empty, not black, not reflecting any light at all, just a void. We sped out of there and didn't stop until we were in the next city. The worst thing about the entire experience, we couldn't find the place on any map. We knew exactly which spot on the interstate to look, and we couldn't find it on Google Maps or any paper map we had. We even asked locals about the creepy gas station out on that stretch of road and got only confused looks. We traveled on that interstate since, and there is no rest stop.
Mm.
You know, judging by some of what we read on this thing, it about the two men having not moved at all, my guess is that the rigor mortis might have set in already, you know.
Oh, you think they were corpses, like actual bodies and stuff? That's creepy.
Yeah, it's just by that description alone, you would think that.
Mm.
Yeah.
Yeah, you would think that.
Yeah, in case you were wondering about the swearing, people, it's because that's what was said within that story. I was quoting it verbatim.
That's okay. Even if you weren't, that's okay.
Right. Anyway, it came for us in the graveyard. We were driving my friend's really old beat up Subaru through a massive graveyard. We stopped and walked down a hill and came across a little pond. There was all there was someone sitting on a rock on the other side of the pond. The figure was all black and we couldn't make out any features other than the fact it looked like a man who was wearing some old style top hat. We stupidly waved and shouted hi. We didn't show any acknowledgement and continued sitting still on the rock. All of a
Uh,
sudden, he jumped to his feet, started running to us on the water, and then vanished in thin water about halfway on the pond. My friends and I screamed and ran back to the car. The car wouldn't start, and we heard something banging on the back of the car. It wasn't a constant bang, but every few seconds or so we'd hear it. Nobody was outside from what we could see in the dark, but something was making a noise on the car. I opened my phone and started dialing my mom to give us a boost, but I had no service. None of us had any cell service. The next 30 minutes were spent trying to get her car started. No banging was heard afterwards, but we felt this heavy pressure around us. Finally, the car started and she hit the pedal to the metal. We sped out of the graveyard so fast. Immediately crossing the gates, all of our phones regained cell service. One thing I know for certain is that someone or something was out there, and it was not an animal or a human.
oh, cryptid.
Insert X-Files theme song right here. It was good to see an old friend. When I was 37, I went to my high school reunion. I flew into the nearest airport and rented a car. The distance was about 35 miles through a very rural and almost abandoned part of the country. About 3 miles outside of town, I see someone on the side of the road, flagging me down. It turned out that it was one of the guys I had attended school with. Jim, not his name, gets in the car and we started talking. I had not seen him in 20 years, but he still looked the same, maybe a little older. We get to town and I ask him if he wants to come to the VFW and have a drink. He says, "No, just take me home." Jim's parents had lived only a few blocks from my grandmother's house, and I turned in that direction, but he said to take him to the outskirts of town. There was a mobile park, there was a mobile home park out there, and I figured that is where he lived. When we reached the end of the turn off, he said, "Just drop me here. It was good to see you again." And he walks off into the night. I go to the VFW, met some of my old classmates. We start to talk. As we are talking about who is coming to the reunion, I mentioned that I had just picked Jim up 3 miles east of town and had dropped him off. Everyone gets quiet. Even the guy singing karaoke stops and lays down the mic. My cousin goes white as a new t-shirt. "Barb, Jim died on that curve 8 years ago. Rolled his car. We were all at his funeral," I was told. I started to feel really dizzy, and I went out to the car to take some deep breaths. There on the seat is the local newspaper printed 8 years previous, containing Jim's obituary. I still have the paper. Someone take Reddit away from me. I can't stop reading ghost stories. This is from Rim at Scariest, March 25th, 2021. What are your thoughts?
I think that person must have had some unfinished business.
It's always the unfinished business, isn't it?
Or justice or revenge. I don't think he was a revengeful ghost.
Nope. No sign of revenge right there. This next story is quite the doozy. Heavy emphasis on the word hell. Fury like a woman scorned. After we moved into our home, we were told a woman had died there at the hands of her abusive husband. She hated men. My dad would wake up with scratches all over himself, and whenever my brother was mean to my sister or I, he would have scratches on him as well. One day, my brother hurt our sister. He hit her with something, grammar. When he woke up later that night, he had a horrible bloody nose. The day we moved out, my brother accidentally broke his twin's arm trying out a wrestling move. He swears that he would have died that night if it wasn't our last in the house. Wow.
That's
Wow.
disgusting. That's a vengeful one.
Absolutely. And this is definitely a Brad fam at it. Because look what it says here. She hated men. Keyword, she hated men. So
Yes.
we definitely know where this was going.
Okay, let's see where it's going.
Ready. Next story. That came for him. I was standing in my parents' room, talking to my very sick dad at the time. He was dying of stage 4 esophageal cancer, and I just butchered that one. I just got the feeling something was behind me. I looked towards the doorway to the living room, and something about 4'6" and fully black is peeling around the corner with its hands on the door frame. I ran towards it, and it slipped back around the door. When I got outside the doorway, there was nothing. My dad was completely confused when I stepped back inside the room. When I tell him, people who stayed in my house in my dad's final days claim to have seen it. My mom saw the figure on multiple occasions in multiple places until he passed away. We haven't seen it since. And here's a reply. I don't know what possesses me to binge read Reddit true real life ghost stories about twice a year when each place I live always has some kind of resident spirit. From Dr. Fish Philosopher Todd at Zoe S. Todd, February 4th, 2021.
February
Wow.
4th, my birthday.
Oh my goodness. Well, in that case, Here is your very late birthday present.
Yeah.
This does not cancel the seriousness of the story, of course, but that's just a fact we wanted to put out there. Okay, here we go. My mother attracted evil. After my parents divorced when I was a teenager, I lived with my mother. I experienced lots of paranormal happenings. Several times when I was reading in my bed, the room would start to feel really icy. Next, it would feel as if something or somebody that hated me was staring at me. When I got that feeling, I would leave the room and come back an hour later. Sometimes during the day, I would see a shadow figure sneaking along my bedroom walls. Something in the flat was pretending to be my dog. I went into my room and heard a deep growl from under the bed. My dog was incapable of making a noise that deep. It sounded like either a really big dog or a man doing his best dog impersonation. Other times my dog would whimper and pace in the room next to mine, but wouldn't come when called, as if he was afraid of something in the hallway. When I moved in with my father, the paranormal activity stopped. Oh, goodness. As you guys can guess, this woman had to have been possessed by a demon. For sure. You had to have been possessed by a demon to attract evil.
Yes. That's true.
Or if you're not possessed, you might have something called narcissistic personality disorder. But
I've
in
heard of that.
yeah, but in this case, it's not narcissistic personality disorder, but a demonic possession. Anyways, continuing on. Oh, well, this is interesting. Evicted by a ghost. Shortly after college, I got married. We immediately moved into a basement apartment because that's all that was available within our budget. This place had a poltergeist, and my wife was terrified. Whatever resided there with us made it clear it wanted to live alone, kind of like my grandmother. She was practically a hermit for the most part, though not as much of a hermit as some others.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever resided there with us made it clear it wanted to live alone. Dishes, glasses, and other items would fly off the shelf. My wife was hit several times. There was always an ominous feeling like we were being watched. At night, when we walked through the apartment in the dark, there would be insanely bright flashes of light that would illuminate the entire room. One night, while we were going to bed, as soon as my wife and I walked into the bedroom, we heard a voice from nowhere say, "My name, move." My wife looked at me. I looked at her. I said loudly, "You've got it, bud." We moved out 2 days later and stayed with family. The old lady who owned the place died a few months later, and the house was torn down. It is still an empty lot to this day. Nothing but grass and a tree. I still
Mm.
drive by it every now and again. Damn, imagine having a ghost as a cranky landlord and not a
Yeah.
human. Wow, that's crazy.
Poltergeists only manifest during stressful times. It's like a overflow of stress, but it comes in the paranormal way.
That's right. I wonder how many landlords out there are possessed by a demon themselves for them to be doing something that is technically against the law.
What do you mean against the law?
You know, some landlords do illegal things as a means to, you know, try to bully a tenant into paying their rent, or rather, they find a dumb way to unjustly evict someone. It's indescribable in a way.
Yeah.
but also easy to describe in the other.
Okay.
That's why it's important for anyone planning to move into a rented home or an apartment to please do your research on what type of landlord you're going to get, because you never know
Yeah.
how a landlord is going to behave towards you. God forbid if you don't pay your rent on time for one reason or another. And
That's right.
reasons for not paying rent on time are usually very reasonable. They're very, very, very sensible. Like if you get fired from a job or quit a job and you're trying to find another one, or if you have some type of medical bills pop up that are very, very expensive. Those are just a couple of examples on why it could be hard to pay rent on time. I haven't lived
Certainly.
I haven't lived in an apartment myself, but I know people that did, and
Mhm.
let's just say those experiences are not pretty.
I believe that.
Okay, moving on. The death march. My dad used to work as a officer at a rural prison. He drove the perimeter of the property for his entire shift, where he would check empty buildings for runaway inmates. It was generally a boring job. One night, my dad was parked on a hill reading a magazine where he started to feel a thumping in his body. He described it as the feeling you get when speakers are playing a song with really heavy bass. He put the magazine down and checked his rearview mirror, where he saw someone outside the truck. He grabbed his pistol and jumped out of the truck with his weapons drawn. Outside the truck, he realized it was a procession of Native Americans walking through the truck and directly through his seat, only to disappear at the exact spot he was sitting. He said it was clear they were ghosts because many of them appeared injured. This went on for a few seconds, and then the whole procession disappeared. He called the other perimeter guy on his walkie to try to explain, and the other guy almost immediately stopped communicating. Turns out the other guy had seen this happen before, but didn't believe in ghosts, so he wouldn't talk about it. I mean, how does
Mm,
that make sense? You've seen a ghost before, but then you still continue to not believe in ghosts afterwards. It's kind of weird. Anyway,
mhm. Yes, it is weird. I think they were reenacting what they were doing, so the justice component of the haunting.
right. Last story, the demon's room. I worked as a forensic nurse in a
Okay.
hospital's lockup unit. We had one older lady who swore she was being haunted and abused by a demon she would call Tiberius. And no, not as in the dog on that one episode of Drake and Josh where they had to babysit the dog of a teacher that hated Drake's character, but I digress. So many crazy things happened while she was on the unit. She'd go into the room, do normal care, leave, and seconds later she'd start screaming bloody murder. We'd run into the room to find her looking like she'd been in a fight with a boxing champ. Bloody lip, black eye, markings all over her body. No one ever saw her doing this stuff to
Mm,
herself.
mm,
Things would get moved around the room by
disturbing.
themselves. Yes, very disturbing. At one point, she was in protective restraints because the doctor thought she was hurting
So,
herself, but new marks would always appear on her tray/cart, would be across the room. Okay, grammar again. The room was secure, so there was no
yeah.
way someone else was doing this. When we asked her questions, she'd just say, "It was Tiberius." After she was discharged, we always had trouble with that room. If there was going to be a rapid response or code, It happened in that room. One night, a guard reported lights blinking on and off. It was that room.
Oh my god, the Tiberius room.
Oh, yeah. It's absolutely quite the interesting thing to see here. Anyway, that was the last
Mm-hmm.
story from that article. So we're going to be doing the usual
Yep.
now.
Okay. If you like our content, feel free to subscribe, like, and hit the bell button. Share if you really like, and we'll see you on next Thursday.
Yeah, because this Tuesday will be Ducky Alien News Network's new video.
Okay. Sounds good.
We will see you all then, folks.
Okay.
Hope you enjoyed those ghost stories, as well
Yeah.
as our tribute to Peter Schilling and our in-depth analysis, or rather,
Uh,
in-depth thoughts on Knott's Berry Farm.
yep.
Okay, folks, time for us to go. But until then,
Okay.
stay safe, stay healthy, drink lots of water, and whatever normal routine you usually do. Anyways, bye!
Bye.
Wenn dir einer im Anzug erzählt, was in den nächsten 4 Jahren geschieht, dann drückt der Schall.